Imagine, like, looking at a screen and just watching a 115-year-old titan of American industry lose a quarter of its entire value in a matter of hours.
Yeah, just falling right off a cliff.
Exactly. Just picture that clean, jagged red line on a stock chart plummeting straight down. Because on July 14th, 2026, so, just a few days ago, that was the reality for IBM.
A 25% drop in a single day.
Right. A massive 25% drop. And when a financial earthquake like that happens, human nature immediately demands an explanation. We want a culprit. I mean, we want a face to blame.
Oh, absolutely, because the stock chart is ultimately just math. But the market, the public, and especially the media, they all need a narrative to make sense of that math.
Otherwise, it's just panic.
Right. Without a story, it's just this void of anxiety.
And, well, dissecting that search for a story is the mission of today's deep dive. We are unpacking this fascinating analytical intelligence brief that looks at how 3 different media shows explained this exact stock crash.
And the sources they use to break this down are amazing.
Yeah, we're looking at raw federal financial filings, immigration data, historical labor records from over a century ago, and media transcripts. We are exploring a phenomenon the source calls grievance capture.
Grievance capture, yeah. It's such a striking term.
It really is. It's basically this incredibly effective mechanism of taking a completely legitimate anger, like a real injury, hijacking it, and then pointing it at the exact wrong target.
It's honestly a masterclass in how information ecosystems and, well, persuasion architectures operate today, where it shows how the human brain processes complex, painful events.
Right. And just a quick note for you listening at home. We aren't here to take sides or endorse any political viewpoints from these shows.
No, not at all.
We are putting on our lab coats today. Our goal is strictly to look at the mechanics of how information and misinformation is built and delivered to you.
So to look under the hood of that machine, we kind of have to start with the claim itself. Like, how did the media explain a legacy tech giant cratering in a single afternoon?
Right. What was the story they sold?
Well, the intelligence brief tracked 3 shows, the PBD podcast, Louder with Crowder, and The Benny Show. And within a week of the crash, all 3 pushed this very specific unified narrative.
Which was what exactly?
They claimed IBM's collapse was a direct result of the company firing American workers and replacing them with cheap foreign labor via H-1B visas.
Okay, I mean, that is a massive claim to make. They're essentially arguing that labor practices and payroll savings caused a one-day 25% market wipeout.
That's the claim.
Wait, the intelligence brief pulled IBM's actual federal filings from that very same day, right? So when we look at the raw SEC data, what was the reality on the ledger?
The reality, mathematically speaking, had absolutely zero to do with payroll or visas.
Wow, zero.
Zero. According to IBM's own CEO in an SEC filing, what happened was a sudden, massive shift in corporate purchasing schedules. Their mainframe hardware revenue, what they call IBM Z, fell 42%.
Ouch.
Yeah, huge drop. But in that exact same quarter, their server and storage revenue went up 37.3%.
Wait, really?
Yeah. The company explicitly called it their strongest quarter on record for that specific division.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second, because if I'm an investor looking at this, hardware is just one part of IBM. Surely a 42% drop in your flagship mainframes doesn't just happen in a vacuum.
Right.
And it definitely doesn't tank a 115-year-old company's stock by 25% unless the market suspects some deeper structural rot, like, say, a major labor and talent crisis. Let's be real. Why would one division crash while another breaks records on the exact same day?
It's a great question, but the data points to a very specific structural issue. It just isn't a labor one.
Okay, so what was it?
It was a global memory supply shock. Across the entire tech industry, the contract prices for DRAM memory skyrocketed.
DRAM? So that's the...
Dynamic random access memory, yeah. It's essentially the crucial short-term memory of a server. Over 3 quarters, the price of DRAM went up 2.9 times.
That's almost triple.
Exactly. Memory suddenly became like more than half the total cost of building a standard server.
That's insane.
It got so bad that competitors like Hewlett-Packard were literally amending contracts to reprice existing orders just because their costs were up nearly 100% quarter over quarter.
Okay, I think I see where this is going. Let's say I'm an IT buyer at a massive corporation and I have a set budget for the year.
Right.
That's like a family draining their entire summer vacation fund to buy a massive chest freezer and a year's worth of beef today, just because they heard grocery prices are doubling tomorrow.
That is the perfect analogy.
So the travel agent loses their business, but not because the travel agent did anything wrong or because of who they hired. It's strictly because of the freezer panic.
Yes. The IT buyers panicked. They knew server prices were about to double next month, so they pulled all their future budgets forward.
Ah, so they bought the servers immediately to lock in the current price.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And to pay for that sudden expenditure, they abandoned or delayed their software and mainframe deals at the absolute last minute. Yeah, deals failed to close in the final 3 weeks of June. It was just a timing miss, heavily concentrated in large enterprise deals.
So a massive shift in corporate purchasing schedules caused a revenue miss, but the media blamed payroll.
Yep.
That's like getting mad at the steering wheel because a mechanic cut your brakes. Why would anyone believe the H-1B story if the public SEC filing so easily disproves it?
Well, and it gets even wilder when you look at the visa data.
Right, because if you look at the brief, it shows IBM's H-1B volume actually fell by 32% since 2016.
Exactly. IBM's share of all U.S. H-1B approvals basically halved over that period. Today, H-1B hires only account for about, I think, 1.5 to 2% of their total U.S. headcount.
That is tiny.
Right. And their biggest H-1B filing entity, which traditionally brought Indian employees into the U.S., went from over 3,700 approvals in 2016 to just 75 in 2022.
Just 75 out of a massive multinational corporation.
Yes, because IBM realized they didn't need to navigate the visa system anymore. They just accelerated direct offshoring instead.
Oh, I see.
They don't bring workers to the U.S. on visas. They just employ them directly in India, where the overhead is cheaper. So the visa numbers fell precisely as the offshoring accelerated.
Which means the media claim collapses in the most inconvenient direction possible for their narrative.
Completely.
The data falsifies the whole thing. The stock crashed because of a faceless global memory chip price hike combined with direct offshoring, not a surge in visas.
Right.
But this brings us to the core of the intelligence brief, the steelman argument for these shows.
Yeah, this is the most important part of the brief.
If the data is this contradictory, why did the lie work so well? I mean, why did the audiences buy it instantly?
Because the underlying injury is 100% real. The brief is incredibly clear on this. IBM did gut its American workforce.
They really did.
And they did it in a brutal, systematic way. A 2018 ProPublica report documented that more than 20,000 U.S. employees aged 40 and over were cut in just a 5-year window.
20,000 people.
Yeah, that accounted for roughly 60% of all their U.S. layoffs.
And the internal communications that came out during those lawsuits were just appalling.
They were. The EEOC, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, they investigated and found top-down messaging directing managers to aggressively reduce older workers.
It wasn't just a coincidence.
No. During the litigation, an executive email from 2016 surfaced where they proposed accelerating this demographic shift by inviting the dino babies.
Ugh, dino babies.
Yeah, that was their literal word for older employees. They wanted them to leave in order to make them an extinct species.
An extinct species. I mean, you spend decades of your life building a company, and the executives call you a dino baby while systematically forcing you out of your career.
It's infuriating.
If you lost your job and you were forced to train your replacement overseas, your anger is entirely justified.
Right.
So the media isn't inventing the grievance, they are just redirecting it.
That is the absolute essence of grievance capture. You take a verifiable, agonizing, harm like losing your livelihood, being insulted by your employers, and you attach a false cause to it.
Because the audience already knows the pain is real.
Exactly. They've lived it, or they've seen it happen to a friend, so their brain naturally accepts the fabricated culprit. And the wider anger about H-1B visas isn't pulled from thin air either.
No, it's based on a very real, documented statutory loophole. We have to talk about this loophole because the brief mentions cases with Cognizant and Disney that are frankly infuriating.
They really are.
I always assumed there were strict laws protecting American workers from simply being swapped out for cheaper visa labor.
Most people assume that. And there is something called a non-displacement rule, which is a legal requirement stating you cannot fire a U.S. citizen specifically to replace them with an H-1B worker.
Okay, so that sounds good on paper.
Right. But it only applies to employers heavily dependent on H-1Bs. And here's the massive loophole. If the H-1B worker is paid just $60,000 or holds a master's degree, the employer is entirely exempt from that non-displacement rule.
Wait a second. You listening at home are probably thinking, okay, but Congress must have updated that number for inflation since 1998, right?
Nope. It has not been touched. That $60,000 threshold was set by Congress 28 years ago, and it was never indexed to inflation.
That is so low for tech.
Right. Today, that is significantly below entry level for a tech job in major markets. But that single frozen number is why it is perfectly legal to fire an American IT worker at, say, Disney and literally force them to train their foreign replacement before they're allowed to leave and collect their severance.
That is just brutal.
The vendor provides the visa worker, the client like Disney does the actual firing, and because of that $60,000 exemption, neither violates the letter of the 1998 law.
So the system really is rigged against the worker. The pain is completely real. But here is the cruel irony the brief points out. These media shows are advocating for restricting H-1B visas as the ultimate fix to save American jobs.
Yeah.
But based on the data, what happens if you actually restrict them?
You actually accelerate the harm to the American worker.
Wait, really? How?
The best available research from Wharton shows that when U.S. firms are denied H-1B visas, they don't suddenly hire locally, they go abroad.
Ah, of course.
They set up foreign affiliates and hire talent there at almost a 1-to-1 rate. IBM is already doing this. IBM's current structure is the direct result of adapting to H-1B restrictions.
So the proposed fix doesn't bring a single job back.
Not one. It just protects the executives making the cuts and pushes even more jobs overseas.
Man. So if the anger is real, but the culprit being presented is wrong, and the proposed solution makes things worse, how exactly do these shows successfully fuse all this in the listener's mind?
That's the million-dollar question.
How do they build the trap? Because the brief breaks down the architecture of persuasion across these three shows, and they each use a structurally different strategy.
Right, they call it the layering of the narrative.
Yeah.
So let's analyze the PBD podcast first. They utilized a strategy the brief calls frame first.
Frame first, okay.
18 seconds into the episode, right in the cold open before the viewer can process anything, they drop the false claim IBM crashed and it's tied to H-1B hiring.
And then
They don't mention that claim again for over an hour.
wait, what do they do for the hour?
Instead, they spend that entire hour delivering perfectly true, verifiable financial details about IBM's offshoring and layoffs.
Oh, wow.
Exactly 15 separate verifiable claims in that segment with zero misinformation. It is 100% accurate data about the real underlying grievance.
Here's where it gets really interesting because it's basically a Trojan horse.
Yes.
Think about the cognitive load on the listener. If 95% of what I tell you is highly accurate, easily verifiable data about IBM's massive layoffs, your brain automatically starts building trust.
Natural, yeah.
It's too exhausting to constantly verify everything, so once I prove I'm right about the layoff, your brain automatically validates the other 5%, the false reason why it happened. The accuracy is spent as currency to buy your belief in the false premise.
That is exactly it. It relies heavily on confirmation bias and energy-saving heuristics in the brain. The listener leaves holding the false frame, but it feels sturdy because it's supported by a memory of rock-solid facts.
That is incredibly sophisticated. But, I mean, what if your audience doesn't have the patience for an hour of financial data? How do you capture the crowd that wants instant outrage, that won't sit through a deep economic breakdown?
Well, that's where Louder with Crowder comes in. They used a different architecture, interleaved.
Interleaved.
Yeah. Instead of separating the truth and the lie,
Right.
they mix false statistics right alongside genuine ones in rapid succession. For example, the brief highlights how they twisted a report on college degrees to attack universities.
Oh, this one was wild.
Yeah.
The host cites a real report from 2026 showing that over 800 college programs leave students worse off. Which, sounds terrifying if you're a parent paying tuition.
It does.
Right.
Until you look at the source document it cited.
Right.
The author's actual title for that research was Only 2% of College Degree Programs at Risk.
Only 2%.
It was meant to be a reassurance document. Bachelor's programs fail at a rate of just 0.6%.
But by interleaving that real 800 programs number with a completely false claim that social work graduates earn no more than high school graduates, the show delegitimizes the university system entirely in the listener's mind.
Exactly. And they also use this interleave tactic with immigration data, which I found fascinating.
That's a 200% claim.
Right, the claim that new H-1B visas went up 200% under the current administration.
This is a perfect example of how the data is manipulated, because that 200% figure is a real data point, right?
It is a real data point, but it's attached to the completely wrong object. Visas did not go up 200%, lottery registrations did. The actual visa ceiling is capped by law at 85,000. It literally hasn't changed.
So how did the registrations spike so dramatically if the visas stayed flat?
Massive duplicate entry fraud. Staffing firms basically figured out how to game the system. They would submit the exact same applicant 15 times through different shell companies to mathematically guarantee they'd win the lottery. This completely warped the raw data to look like a massive 200% surge in immigration. Once the government cracked down and required one entry per person based on passports, the duplicate entries collapsed from over 400,000 to just 800.
So the true sentence, the reality of the situation is fraudsters tried to game a fixed-size lottery, and the government shut them down, keeping visas completely flat.
Yep.
But the show said on-air visas rose 200%. They used the exact same underlying data point to convey the exact opposite meaning.
It's statistical sleight of hand.
Okay, so PBD uses truth as heavy ballast to anchor a lie. Crowder twists true stats to create a false reality. What if you just abandon reality entirely?
Then you get the third strategy from the Benny Show. The brief calls this saturated.
Saturated, so just flooding the zone.
Exactly. It's just rapid-fire, escalating falsehoods that run completely against live data.
Right, like claiming Canada is undergoing a total replacement of its native-born population.
Yeah.
If you look at the official Statistics Canada data from that exact week, the non-permanent resident population had actually dropped by 18.8% over the previous 18 months.
Right, so the claim wasn't just exaggerating a trend, it was pointing the exact opposite way from reality.
But because the audience is so primed for outrage, they don't require the true ballast data that the PBD podcast provided.
And that is a key insight from the intelligence brief. The quantity of true material a show needs to provide is inversely proportional to the audience's prior commitment to the narrative.
That makes so much sense.
If the audience is already deeply angry and feels disenfranchised, you don't need to build trust with facts. You just have to give them a target.
Now, these media strategies feel so modern, right? So perfectly optimized for the engagement algorithms of 2026.
Oh, completely.
But the brief takes this fascinating historical detour, and this is where it really blew my mind. This mechanism of hijacking real pain and pointing it at a vulnerable outgroup, it's well over a century old.
It's essentially a playbook from the late 19th century.
Yeah.
The brief goes back to 1878, to Dennis Kearney and the Working Men's Party in California. Kearney wrote this powerful manifesto about the genuine economic misery of American workers.
Which was very real at the time.
Very real. He correctly wrote that a bloated aristocracy, meaning the wealthy railroad and mining employers, had sent to China for cheap labor, specifically to undercut free Americans.
So he correctly identifies that the employer is the one making the active choice to suppress wages.
But then, instead of attacking the bloated aristocracy, he pivots. He points the entire political movement and eventually the violent mobs directly at the Chinese workers.
He blames the instrument, not the architect.
Precisely.
And this wasn't just political rhetoric. It led to real, horrific bloodshed. The brief details the 1885 Rock Springs Massacre in Wyoming.
The mechanics of Rock Springs are chilling. Union Pacific had cut wages and was facing widespread strikes from their white miners.
So they wanted to break the strike.
Right. Management deliberately ordered the hiring of Chinese miners who would accept lower pay, specifically to break the strikes.
And the white miners retaliated.
They retaliated by murdering 28 Chinese workers and burning down their homes, and no one was ever convicted.
And the detail that really sticks with you, the state governor refused to let the surviving Chinese miners leave Wyoming.
Yeah, that part is wild.
He literally used the state apparatus to keep them there so the coal company could maintain production and keep wages suppressed. The state protected the employer's cheap labor supply while the workers themselves were being slaughtered.
It's just devastating.
So putting aside the horrific violence for a moment, let's look at the purely economic reality because, you know, people argue that this protects wages. If you remove the foreign worker, do things actually get better for the native worker?
History gives us 3 massive test cases, and the data is pretty definitive. First, the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882.
Okay.
Afterward, the supply of skilled white workers actually dropped by 32% in affected areas, and manufacturing output plummeted.
Wow, so it backfired.
Completely. Second, the strict immigration quotas of the 1920s. Economists found that U.S.-born workers in areas losing immigrants did not see any wage benefits whatsoever. Employers just mechanized or hired internal migrants.
Right.
And third, the termination of the Bracero agricultural program in 1964.
Oh, I really want to dig into that one.
Yeah.
Because the Bracero program brought Mexican farm workers into the U.S., right?
Right.
And when the government ended it, the assumption was that corporate growers would finally have to pay American wages to American citizens to pick the crops.
That was the theory. But the reality of capital is that it always finds a way around labor costs.
Mhm.
The removal of Mexican farm workers didn't raise domestic wages or employment at all.
Really, not at all.
Not at all. The corporate growers didn't suddenly start paying locals triple the wage. Instead, they funded the invention of mechanical tomato harvesters and cotton pickers.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they just automated the labor away entirely.
So 3 eras, 3 massive research teams. In every single case, when the imported workers were removed, native wages did not go up because the wage floor isn't set by the immigrant.
Exactly.
It's set by the employer's alternatives, like automation or offshoring. Which brings up the real question, why does blame always flow down to the worker and never up to the decision maker?
Because the real cause is almost always faceless.
Faceless.
Yeah, a global memory supply shock or a shift in capital allocation strategy. These are abstract structural concepts. You cannot be politically energized by a corporate spreadsheet or, a mechanical tomato harvester.
Right. There's no villain there.
Exactly. Humans are wired for narrative. We crave a villain we can picture. Saying they hired foreigners to take your jobs fits in a single sentence, and it comes with a human face. As the brief notes, audiences will consistently choose an explanation they can act on emotionally over one they can only understand intellectually.
It's the path of least cognitive resistance. So let's bring it all together. When you, the listener, are out there consuming information, watching your feeds, listening to your favorite commentators, remember that the most dangerous misinformation doesn't deny your reality.
It does the exact opposite.
Right. It validates your very real pain. It acknowledges that you've been screwed over, that your job was shipped away, that your degree isn't paying off. It builds trust by seeing your injury. But then, right when it has your trust, it hands you the wrong culprit.
The ultimate takeaway for anyone trying to navigate this information ecosystem is that critical thinking requires separating the injury from the cause.
That's a great way to put it.
Just because your anger is 100% correct, just because the pain of losing your career is devastating and unjust, does not mean the face on the screen is the one who caused it. I mean, the executives at IBM who drafted emails about making older workers extinct, they are shielded by this media narrative.
The narrative provides cover for the architects of the misery.
Always.
I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over, building on what we've discussed today regarding those mechanical tomato harvesters. The brief mentioned that automation disrupts labor markets just like offshoring.
Oh, absolutely.
And as we sit here in 2026, AI is beginning to take over massive swaths of the white-collar workforce. But AI, just like a memory chip supply shock, is completely faceless.
It's just code on a server.
Right. As the economic pain of the AI transition really starts hitting the middle class, will human nature allow us to be angry at an algorithm? Or will we be forced to invent a human outgroup like a new face to blame for the AI transition just so we have someone to throw our anger at?
It's a really sobering question because, well, if history's any guide, the bloated aristocracy always finds a way to point the mob downward.
It always starts with a jagged red line on a chart and ends with a search for a scapegoat. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. Stay curious, question the narratives, and we'll catch you next time.